When we talk about these things and what you portray, it's rather dire when we're looking at this thing. And I think this is what's very important about these kinds of gatherings is also to think about the hope. And because we can't live in a dire situation and just, remain there. And there has to be hope. And I think it is about collaborations like this, but I think it's a work of the scientists, but it's also the work of the designers. And it's the work of the philanthropists. It's a work of this social agency. So what we are going to see now and hear is Joyce Drawn, who is a urban designer and architect, comes from a firm, a very well-known firm in Vancouver, Perkins and Will. And we know her particularly well, of course, in the Faculty of Environmental Design, and I'm very, very happy that we can broadcast your profile even broader with this symposium. Has extensive experience in the design of sustainable communities. And just a little bit of what those communities were. You may be familiar with them in our Prairie region. But recently, Joyce led the design for a winning master plan for the Blatchford redevelopment, which is based on and is transforming Edmonton's municipal airport lands that you might be familiar with. And it's a model of sustainable city building that we're going to see there. In a similar initiative, Joyce also led the work on Saskatoon's North Downtown, replacing the city's rail lands, and that's something we really want to hear about in this city, with a complete community. Joyce is also has lead roles in the design of many of Vancouver's flagship sustainable communities, which include, and you may be familiar with these, Southeast False Creek and East Fraser lands. So I think that when you look at Joyce's work, I think it reflects her and her firm's commitment to the creation of meaningful places that embody a community's historic, cultural, and social values. And all of those values are extremely important when we're talking about a healthy community. So what results, I think, in the work that is done by Joyce and her colleagues is that they're reaching for more the sustainable, the livable, and the healthy in the urban realm. I might also add, and Joyce and I have met on other occasions, and that is also because Joyce is a board member of the Council for Canadian Urbanism. So with that, I'd like to invite Joyce up to speak to us now.
Thank you very much, Nancy. And I just want to take a moment to thank all the members of the Urban Alliance. It's such a fantastic idea and such a thoughtful group, given the events I've heard about that you've already put on. I'm from Vancouver. Vancouver's touting itself as the world's greenest city, or soon to be, but we don't have anything like this. And I'm certainly keen to get back and bring this idea to the university and to the city. So thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this. Andy really set this up very nicely for me, because he talked about the relationship, the deep relationship between urban environments and human health. And that's really what our firm focuses on. I've had the great experience, the great privilege in the last sort of 10 years, I suppose, working on brownfield sites. And that's a particularly interesting place to look at urban design, because it allows you to bring together all of those layers that are interdependent in human health. It's not as easy for those people like Jeanette Sadiq Khan in New York City, who are really doing the kind of guerrilla urban design in an already existing environment. Just want to point you to this quote that I found from the World Health Organization's. This is the preamble to a 1946, the constitution for the WHO. In 1946, it was adopted. And it goes very much to the heart of our work. Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And I think that's what we're looking for here. We're looking, as Andy said, we're looking for ways to make a healthy lifestyle an easy choice for people. I'm not a physician, obviously, but our professions are overlapping more and more. Just to give you an example, this is where I work in the South Downtown, which is really the origins of the term Vancouverism, tall towers, low block, perimeter blocks, but lots and lots of amenities. This was part of a tour that a group of young physicians in Vancouver asked us to give them because they were so interested in understanding what are those ways that we can start to design the built environment to allow people to have more access to city resources, to particularly, I guess, to be able to walk in as many different ways as possible. And this is what I'm going to talk to you about today. Whoops, going in the wrong direction. Of course, it's nice to see graphics starting to overlap as well. I won't go into this because Andy covered it so beautifully. Same thing here, except to say that cities are recognizing that relationship between design and the lifestyle diseases, in this case, chronic disease. New York City's been particularly good at this, and I'm imagining David and company, or David Down, are familiar with their active design guidelines, just a wonderful compendium of how you start thinking about changing the city for active lifestyles. So there's really 5 considerations that we bring automatically to our work when we're thinking about designing a community, and number 1 is access to nature. Cities aren't doing enough of this, and certainly with brownfield sites, it's an opportunity to be much more ambitious in your goals. Connectivity is number 2, and I could easily have put walkability here, but it's all about giving people the opportunity to walk to as many places in their community as possible. And of course, this is also part and parcel of engaging with others in your community. So it's a big subject. Diverse uses, Andy talked about mixed use and the importance of it, as did David, New York City and all its resources for people. You want walkability, but you also want the amenities and the services and the shopping and learning opportunities that go with it. Housing choice is huge, and I know Naheed Nenji talked just recently about the crisis here. That's something that any new plan should be focusing on, especially when you've got a chance to build a critical mass of housing. And finally, renewable energies. This is something our office has taken a lead role in. We have 8 sustainability research people within our office, which is a little bit unusual for a design firm. But we are very serious about helping cities understand how they can move that agenda forward. So I want to start, Nancy mentioned the Blatchford redevelopment. I want to start with our Edmonton project, subject of an international competition, and I give all the credit to City Council and staff. They set the parameters for this competition, very, very high bar. They asked for a global model for sustainable city building. You can see the site, it's the old municipal airport, just 2 kilometers from City Hall. So ultimately very much a part of the metropolitan area with huge responsibilities, I would say. Just drawing your attention to the photograph at the top, this is the view to the downtown core from the midfield in the airport, something that we wanted to maintain as part of the design. It's always difficult when you're dealing with a fairly complex design problem to communicate it to people in sort of relatively simple terms. And David used his arm. We thought as a team, how could we characterize this project in a really simple way? And so we have a park, we have connectivity, we have access to growth and sort of catalysts for growth. And finally, we have history, and I'll explain that. Starting off at the top left, this is really, the kind of overarching aim of the plan is connectivity. And we, tongue-in-cheek, used the term connectivity to characterize that. But in a more serious vein, you can see in the top left-hand circle, Edmonton has a wonderful series of riverside parks, as does Calgary. But what they didn't have at this site, which was quite a bit to the northwest was any kind of significant open space. There were all the municipal reserve parks, but nothing really significant to bring the community together. And so we saw an opportunity because there's an existing rail corridor that runs down the west side of, you'll see in that circle, that would connect this park directly to that series of parks. We had an opportunity going east-west as well, and eventually created a 27-kilometer, what we call river-to-river loop, so really connecting this community back into the larger city. At a more local level, to the top right-hand side, there was a real ambition to bring the community together by extending the urban pattern that already exists around the perimeter straight onto the site, so that not just roads, but also walking paths, cycling paths, etc. And the blue line that runs through there is Edmonton's new LRT line. Only the south part of that's built. There's one station on site right now, but it's a similar, I know Calgary's got a very ambitious LRT program in place right now as well, and both cities seem to be in a race to get the most stations in place in the shortest time available. Connecting to growth for a plan like this, any plan really, is huge. To have, you want a plan like this to be viable, and so you look around the site and say, well, what's here that can help us? So number one, the site's blessed. It's got Canada's largest technical institute, Northern Alberta Institute of Technology, 13,000 full-time students, soon to be 25. They will be a partner on the site as well, so bringing that student that student vibe and kind of energy to the community. We have a successful shopping mall immediately south of the site. You wouldn't necessarily think this is a natural, but it absolutely is, because one of the hardest things to establish in a mixed-use community is new retail. Developers always struggle with that and end up subsidizing retailers for many, many years. With existing shopping here and a draw for people from all over Edmonton, there's that kind of built-in attraction to this area. And then finally, we are also blessed by having Canada's largest critical care hospital just steps away. That's the Royal Alex. And a rehab hospital right next to that. And the idea is actually to bring many of the hospital services onto the site. There's a health agency that will be building on the site, but also we're keeping our fingers crossed that Alison Redford's, the former premier, her idea of bringing neighborhood clinics to the city, I think the number was 143 to the city of Edmonton, would be something that we would see fitting very, very naturally into this site. Then finally, history. Connecting any community to its history is absolutely crucial. And we use this for history because we chose to embed the runways into the plan rather than tearing them out and making them disappear. We also have the benefit of some World War II hangars, which are amazing places. The old terminal building, which is already a school, and the observation tower, which become artifacts on the site. So this is the plan, and you'll see the park is really the centerpiece. There's three neighborhoods. On the westerly side, the agri-hood. The city had a huge ambition for urban agriculture, and this increases the city's urban agriculture by about 60%. The Technology and Research District on the easterly side, and it has the benefit of the LRT running right through the center and is also immediately adjacent to NAIT. And then finally, the town center in the lower, at the lower neighborhood, right next to the mall, and that's where most of the retail and commercial life will be. A kind of natural synergy with that. It's going to be for 30,000 people. In terms of amenities, the live, work, play, and learn. Those are all things that you want in a community where you can walk to these things. They can be part of your life. You can engage people and recognize faces every day as you make your way to shopping, to school, to work. We are aiming at 100% renewable energy. That means net zero energy. And again, looking for those, giving people those lifestyle choices. So I want to start with the park. No waste leaves the site. This hill is 100 feet high, and it's made of the waste that is used from the excavation both of stormwater lakes that you see in the mid-ground, and also for the construction of all of the development parcels. This park allows people really to live in a park. 98% of the residents in this community are within a 2-minute walk of a park. That's because it's not just this park, but neighborhood parks beside it, and it's those connections to these amenities that are super important. Just want to point out one thing in the rendering, and that's you'll see the long line on the far side of the lake with little red elements along it. That's what we call the Northern Lights, and it's part of an initiative to really make this park for all Edmontonians. It's what we call our kind of promenade, and we expect residents to come here and walk on, say, a sunny winter day. Those little pavilions will use geothermal heat to provide some moderate heat and stopping points along the way, and allowing people to get out of the harsh Edmonton wind. And as I mentioned, the access to the park is super important. We have the main park, but you'll see there's also community parks that weave into the neighborhoods on all sides. The blue line is, of course, that river-to-river loop connecting this whole community back to the larger city. Lots of paths through the park, and of course all the roads lead to the park as well. Again, you see the Northern Lights, that orange band that runs down the left-hand side. And this is zooming into that Northern Lights amenity. It does have housing along it. We do want eyes on the park and the streets, but mostly it's there for recreation, for civic uses. There might be small galleries, small cafes, and certainly some of the recreational uses for NATE are also imagined to be there. This is just moving down towards the epicenter of the community, which is Wapme Plaza, Wapme being one of the original bush pilots in Edmonton and celebrated here. And then finally, the southerly portion of the Northern Lights actually starts to soften and become more green. This is where we're trying to bring a kind of balance between this higher density neighborhood and access to nature. So I just want to go back to the connectivity, and really that has everything to do with mobility. And what we try to do with the mobility networks in our plans is we try to nest them as much as possible so that they're interreliant, interdependent. Here you can see the transit network on the left-hand side. There are 2 stations planned and a possible 3rd in the future. It's the purple line, and it goes through the site and crosses the Yellowhead Highway and then heads up to St. Albert. So a real regional connection where all of the other lines that you see here, there's a tram that runs down the westerly neighborhood, the diagonal one, and the bus lines are all actually bringing people into the transit station. To the right-hand side, this is complemented by the bike network, and I would say that the policy in this community is really that all of the streets, except for the ones that you see highlighted, are meant to be shared streets. David talked about the idea of getting rid of streets and making it harder for people to drive. That's not the policy here. It's actually a policy of distributing streets. So you've got lots and lots of streets and lots of choices for drivers. They don't have to go barreling down these great wide streets, but they do have to share streets with cyclists and generally drive a little bit slower. The pedestrian is first in all of our street design, and I'm not going to get into the details. You have a great complete streets person at City Hall, and we're working on that with our city as well. The important thing, I think, is that we're trying to make streets as intimate as possible for people. These great wide rights-of-way make it very, very difficult for pedestrians to feel comfortable. And I can tell you that in my experience on every single master plan, it's the engineers that need to be educated. They they need their space in the street for their utilities, but you know what? If you work hard enough and long enough with them, you really can get them to compact them and lead to much, much narrower rights of way, which just feel way more comfortable for people, especially in a windy environment. We're working, there's one street in the Olympic Village that's 14 meters wide, the right-of-way. That represents probably the biggest war with engineers that I've had in my career. But there need to be more of them because it makes for a much easier walking and enjoyment of the streets. And of course, in Edmonton, as in Calgary, climate responsive design of streets is tantamount. I mean, what we've done here is we've offset the blocks, so you don't get more than 3 blocks in a row, and they're relatively small blocks, so that wind can build up and make it really uncomfortable for you to walk in the streets. That's absolutely key to this. We also have the huge benefit of the hill, which provides some opportunities for people to use the park, the northerly part of the park, quite comfortably in the winter. So back to the mix of uses. This is something we worked very hard at, and you'll notice that in the town center at the base of the drawing, that's where the critical mass of shopping and excuse me, and commerce and offices. There's about 250,000 square feet of shopping. That's kind of equivalent to a small high street. It's about 4 blocks long. And it ends in Watmay Plaza. The other end, interestingly enough, we're currently working with the mall owners on developing a walkable community on their site. So it's kind of the dream of synergy for us. But what I wanted to point out is that the amenities, the retail, doesn't just reside in the town center. We've pulled it up into the neighborhoods, and those points of mixed use are also places, for instance, where we'd like to see the health clinics I talked about, their transit stops, and you'll notice that there are also locations where the green network starts to move through. So it's bringing all of those opportunities together for people to both engage on a social level, but also to get to places as easily as possible. I won't talk about it at length, but we worked very hard with the city to understand what this kind of mix would realize in terms of jobs. And it stands at about 11,000 jobs, and that's about 1 job per every 3 persons in the community. Not a bad target for a brand new community. There's also 3 schools, 1 elementary and 2 high schools in the light turquoise. And NATE, of course, is a partner on this site. They're looking at bringing a lot of their programs into the town center, including their culinary program. They hope to have a bakery on the main street. They also have the biggest meat cutting course in Canada, and so there's likely to be a butcher on Main Street as well. But I mean, this opportunity to bring an educational institution together with the community is just, it's quite unbelievable. It's a real blessing. So I just wanted to walk you quickly through the 3 neighborhoods, just to give you a little bit more of a sense of the look and feel of this place. Starting with the agri-hoods, and this is really focused on families. It's the lower density part of it. You can see the what we call Bush Pilot's runway is the top rendering. So that's the primary armature built over the runway, and it's showing the eventual tram route along that street. But you can see the attention to making it a great environment for pedestrians. That's our first focus, is making it comfortable, making it easy for people to sit outside, to use the sidewalks. They're very wide, and also access to the trains themselves. Like Calgary, Edmonton has a highboy system. We didn't want that to affect the edges of the street. We wanted to keep the street down at grade, so we elected to put the stations in the middle. That's not dissimilar to San Francisco's LRT system. It works very well. The stations are relatively discrete, and it means the pedestrians in the street can move very, very easily. The rendering in the bottom is what we refer to as the furrows. It's a kind of, you can see the kind of agrarian geometry of this neighborhood, and this is where all of the urban agriculture opportunities reside. About 600 plots, but also some larger community-based plots, which you see in this rendering here. Very quickly on housing, just to give you a sense of the choice here, the city was very explicit. They wanted housing choice. They did not want single-family housing. The only single-family housing has to be net zero. There's a handful, 50 demonstration houses. All the rest in this neighborhood are 4 to 6 stories, very comfortable sort of walk-up, and a lot of row houses. The Technology and Research District, by virtue of the fact it's got the LRT running through it, is clearly the place where you want to put your density. This is where you want to make it easy for people to access transit. You want to, and it's also the place that serves the NAIT students that commute every day in and out of the campus. The green space here that connects through to the main park is more of a kind of meandering corridor, but it does have a job. It carries stormwater, and the top rendering that you see here is a depiction of one of those green fingers, a little bit more urban and dense than you might imagine, but nevertheless a kind of working green lung. And at the water's edge, this is a rendering in the bottom of the what the Northern Lights might be like, one section of it, with housing. There happens to be a gallery in this one, and also the rowing club for the NAIT's recreation program. At the housing here, again, higher density, more into 6 and 8 story forms that you would see along that primary spine, and getting into housing forms that would suit NAIT students. NAIT already has funding in place. They don't currently have students on campus, but they have funding in place for 1,200 beds, which we see as a major bonus here. Nancy's telling me I've got 5 minutes, so I'm going to go quickly through the rest of this. Just to say the town center is a place for much higher density, and this is where we see, we have helped the city with the rezoning. There is a requirement for 20% affordable housing. I know that isn't something that's currently part of this city's policy. It's been in Vancouver for a long, long time, and we would certainly advocate for it in any city that where we're master planning. It's one of the few ways to get affordable housing in place. We are reducing the carbon footprint here with our renewable energies enormously. Edmonton's currently at 24 tons of carbon per person per year. We know they can get down to approximately 4, and that's equivalent with cities like Hammarby Sjöstad in Stockholm and other Scandinavian examples. One of the reasons it's so high is because of where it gets its electricity. It's all coal-fired. That drives it hugely high, and to bring it down, we are proposing a biomass plant that will rely on Edmonton's waste system. I don't expect you to memorize this either, but this is how we're getting there. The orange represents the biomass. It's going to be generating heat and power. The orange represents a combination of that and geothermal, both of which are complementing each other. What's really remarkable about this project, though, I would say from a renewable energies point of view, is that it goes well beyond carbon neutral. That's because the proposal is to take any of the excess heat, and there's lots of it in these processes, off-site to the big consumers, and that includes the hospitals, the government buildings, and some other educational institutions as well. So this is what the final plan looks like. I have a few minutes to just take you very quickly through. I've got about 6 slides to show you, but Nancy mentioned Saskatoon. We're taking a very similar sort of attitude around to Saskatoon. In this particular case, they had a huge issue around trying to cross over active CPR rail right-of-way, 45 meters wide. They asked us for bridges. We decided to give them a park. it actually does carry roadways, but in terms of walkability, in terms of giving people opportunities to cycle, walk between the two parts of this community, we saw this as the real glue and the kind of healthy solution. On the right-hand side, we've just been hired by the City of Saskatoon to look at what they call their integrated growth plan, and that will mean this North Downtown Master Plan is the first step, but what it means is looking at their future transit opportunities and layering onto that all the development opportunities they can see in the city. It's an enormous project, but one that I would advocate for seeing in any city. It's absolutely essential when you're trying to bring these things together. I won't go into the networks. That's the final plan. You can see very mixed-use neighborhood. Just the rendering in the very center, that's the foot of the land bridge taking you over to the other side of the city. And I want to end with 4 more slides, if you'll indulge me. In Vancouver, we were recently asked by the city to look at another brownfield site. If you know Vancouver at all, the top right-hand sketch shows a planned expressway to go right through the city that was done in the 1960s. Happily, there was a very active, a very strong group of civic activists who came out against it, huge protest, stopped it, except for this one little piece, 1.25 miles long, that happened to sneak in. We call it the viaduct. You can see it, so it sort of bends around one of the stadia. It's right at the end of False Creek. And what the city wanted to know, the city owns the land on the easterly side. There's private ownership on the westerly side. They wanted to know how can we re-envision this? So this is what we suggested. You may know of the Agacon's campaign for pluralism. It's a tremendous piece of work, like all of his work, but I think what I find the most fascinating about it is he's advocating for major city parks in some of the most conflicted areas in the world. And the first one to be finished was in Cairo. Why? Because the way he puts it, these are the kind of beautiful but neutral places where you can bring people of disparate incomes, disparate perspectives, and disparate cultures into a place where they can enjoy nature together and engage with each other. It's a really simple message, but a really important one. This allowed for 2 city blocks on the right-hand side of the park that are city-owned. That's where affordable housing is going, as well as social housing. On the left-hand side, this is the last development parcels belonging to Concord, the developer that developed all of South Downtown, the original Expo lands, but a really nice way of bringing those 2 parts of the city together. It also brought roads together, so rather than 5 disparate parcels, it's now 2 major park spaces, and we worked very hard at making it easy for pedestrians to get across that road. This is the aerial view of that, just the connections through, and then finally a depiction of what the park might be like. Last thought I'm going to leave you with is that even with these major parks, super amenities for the whole city, it's really important to think about the local communities, and you'll see that we have smaller parks that run along this kind of promenade down to the water, and those are effectively the parks that would become the new open space for a very disenfranchised community, the downtown east side, that suddenly will have access to this part of the city, and primarily False Creek, which is a great amenity in the city. So thank you very much. I really appreciated being here. And
Thank you, Joyce. Some questions for Joyce. Yes.
Joyce, what did you have to do with zoning in Edmonton?
I'll just, so people can hear. So the question from David was, what did you do in Edmonton around zoning to make this happen?
That's a really long answer, but the short answer is we helped the city write the zoning. It was a completely different zoning than they had seen before. The first argument was, why can't we bring all the other zoning that we already have together and just, be done with it? And we said, no, not going to work. I mean, number one, just to give you an example, was the 20% affordable housing. That hadn't really been part of the zoning before. And so there's things like that. There's new parking requirements. A big part of this plan was reducing the parking demand. And so we went from 2 cars per unit to 1 car per unit. Why? Because people are living close to transit. They got lots of opportunities to walk. They don't have to be getting in their car all the time. And we have a park once strategy, which means in the town center, you can conceivably park somewhere and only park there once and get all the services you need. Most people these days, especially in that part of Edmonton, they drive around to, the grocery store, the department store over here, the shoemaker over here. They're all different destinations. So we were very much a part of that, and I'm very happy that we were there. It was a good outcome, and actually the naysayers, I'd say, at the city are now advocating for this kind of policy.
Another question here?
I can repeat it.
Okay. Thanks, Joe.
A common argument you hear with renewable energy is the cost. Does that affect your master plan? Did the cost increase? And then the second part to that, which you kind of touched on, do you think that's going to affect the demographic of people living there?
So the question was that that renewable energies cost more money, and how are we dealing with that? And the second question was, I'm not quite sure, is it going to affect the demographic living there?
In the sense of, is it going to be higher income versus lower income? You
Okay.
touched on the
20%. The real answer to renewable energies, and maybe, I don't know if there was an article in the Globe this week, actually, on the Germany and the fact that they're starting to face up to the costs of renewable energies. Yes, it does cost more money. What we're attempting to do, though, is by selling excess heat off-site, heat and power off-site, that's where we were looking for the balance. In the Olympic Village, where there's a district energy system, it's actually drawing heat from sewage. People do pay slightly more for their power, but what we're finding is that there's an acceptance of that, especially among younger buyers or renters. A lot of them are looking for that kind of situation. So I can't say it's cheap, it's cheaper, but I think cities need to start investing in clean energy, and it's going to cost a little bit of money up front. Yes, here?
I'm just curious, because I was talking to the city about this yesterday. What were you able to get your kind of minimum road size to?
Through a lot of face-to-face meetings. I can't tell you how many meetings we had with the transportation department there. Although, to be fair to Edmonton, there's a lot of folks, both in the transportation department and in the planning department, who are starting to work together a lot more, so it's making it easier. We've got some extremely narrow streets in this plan, like down to, I'd say, 12 meters. But those tend to be in the, sort of right in the heart of the residential area. But it was still a leap for Edmonton to go to even 20 meters. And, it's all about the utilities. You have to convince engineers that, I mean, they need the space to get down and service them, but there are ways of doing it. And if you work with some enlightened engineers, there's a few of them around. They know how to do that.
We have one more question there.
Thanks for such a positive talk. You talked about landscape connectivity. I'm a biologist, so it warms my heart to hear it, because I think ecological infrastructure. So can you speak a little bit to what nature means in these plants? Are you looking at biodiversity? Are you looking at native plants and animals in these parks, native species to move in and out and through these neighborhoods?
We absolutely are, and thank you for asking that. The question was whether or not we're looking at native species, we're looking at local habitats, that kind of thing as we design the park. And yes, we've been working with a very talented group, Phillips Farberg Smallenberg out of Vancouver, and habitat's a huge part of this. As are native landscapes, we're reintroducing the aspen native landscape, but interestingly enough, even the stormwater lakes and the hill, some people would say, well, that's artificial, but in fact, it is part of Alberta's cultural landscape. It's referred to as the Kettle and the Knob, formed by glaciers, and we're also looking at wetlands, reintroducing wetlands around the edges of the lake as well. Of course, there were many, many discussions with the parks folks about, attracting all sorts of birds that were going to cause trouble and that kind of thing. But I mean, it's all the things that you want to see in a natural setting. It does happen to be the confluence of the two continental flyways across North America. So who wouldn't want birds?
Thanks, Joyce.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Joyce.